So I really hate those BetterHelp ads that we keep getting on YouTube recently. Not the ones that play a video in front of your video, but the ones where you're scrolling on mobile and it says something like, "Have you failed at your New Year's resolution again? That's because New Year's resolutions don't work, but therapy does. Sign up for BetterHelp," or something. I really hate those because I'm great at New Year's resolutions. I had 4 New Year's resolutions last year, and I at least stuck with all of them. I didn't achieve all of them, but I achieved something like it or stuck with it. Get good, I guess. But I know the secret is to make the resolution something that is approachable and appealing. For example, one of my New Year's resolutions was to write one sentence every day about something I was proud of myself for doing or being that day. This is a lot easier than committing to running 5 miles a week. Relatively painless, but it did make a significant difference. But the big New Year's resolution that I had last year was to watch all of Star Trek. I knew this was going to be a giant task, so I actually started about a month before 2022 ended, so that I had the best chance of completing Star Trek in 2023. However, I knew that I was not going to finish it, but I didn't really have much of a concept of how much I was not going to finish it. I got kind of bogged down in things like I read some books, I read some comics. I did a deeper dive into some of these series than I thought I was going to do, and others that I didn't expect to watch this year, I just kind of blasted through. So I expect that it's going to take me a long time to get through all of the Star Trek that I actually anticipate getting through. There are some series that I just don't care about, but there are other series like Enterprise that I do actually intend to read all of the books, and that could keep me stopped up for a long time. So I decided that what I'm going to do is just do an annual review of what I watched this year. Actually, I'm going to do an annual review of what I've watched so far. That way, if it takes me 5 years, I'm still kind of keeping up with how it's going. So what I've made today is a ranking of all of the Star Trek content that I've seen so far. I'm going to give a little bit of an explanation of why, but I, of course, want to caveat this with, this is my personal opinion. I did not use any objective qualities when deciding on this rank. This rank was created with my heart. And if you have a problem with any of these placements, I expect it. I expect that much of this will be extremely controversial for the 300 people who might see this video. With that in mind, I'll go ahead and tell you which things I have not seen. That way you can know what is going to end up being in the ranking, and then I'll proceed backwards, so best to worst. So I have not seen Deep Space Nine. I've seen a couple of episodes, but since I'm making my way through the other long series, it doesn't really make sense for me to seriously try to sit down and watch all of Deep Space Nine right now. I also am not a huge fan of plots that have to do with religion, so I expect to do this one probably last, although I did watch several episodes this week while I was stuck on a plane, and I found that I do like it a lot more now that I've become familiar with the characters through osmosis, but I still don't intend to watch it until at least I pass the Battle of Wolf 359 in TNG. I have not seen Picard. I have not finished TNG, so I'll get to Picard when I get to it. My mom loved Picard, and I've seen a couple of episodes from the 3rd season over her shoulder, but I didn't really know what was going on. I have not watched past episode 3 of Discovery. I really hated Discovery when it came out because it came out around the same time as The Orville. And The Orville did way worse with the critics, and I heard some rumors that I'm no longer sure if I actually believe, and I no longer really care, but at the time I heard that the critics were being paid off to rate Discovery a whole lot higher than The Orville, and so to me, Discovery was this elitist thing because it was not a comedy, it was a drama, and the critics were hating on The Orville because it was funny. And so already didn't like Discovery immediately, which I think is a pretty common sentiment, but I became extremely frustrated with it when I thought that the critics had been paid to rate it higher. And even if they weren't paid, I still didn't like the fact that the critics were dumping all over The Orville. So I didn't really give Discovery a real chance. That being said, I do intend to watch Discovery before the final season comes out, even if I hate it, because it seems like an opportunity to actually watch something of reasonable length before the final season is released and actually catch the ending of a Star Trek series in real time. I'm not sure how many times in my lifetime that's actually going to be reasonable, so I gotta do it. I have not really seen short treks. I did watch the first 2 episodes. When I was in middle school, Halo Reach came out, and I really, really loved the short films that were released with Halo Reach that clearly inspired the first short trek. It's extremely similar. However, the first short trek is extremely pale in comparison to the Reach short films, which it's obviously drawing from. And if I hadn't been a Halo fan, I would have been more impressed, but I couldn't help comparing it in my mind, so I didn't like it. I watched the second one, and I guess I was a little bit seeded by the disappointment of the first one as well. So I'll return to short treks at some point. I have only seen the first 2 episodes of the animated series, which I absolutely loved, but I will get to it when I finish with the original series. And I think that's it. I have seen very short treks, but I did not put it in this ranking. If I had to put it in this ranking, it would be at the bottom. I really hated Walk, Don't Run. It was cringy. I didn't like it. I also didn't really like the rest of them. They were fine. I wasn't angry like other people, but I really did not like Walk, Don't Run. So on to the things that I actually did watch. So I had 10 things that I watched that I put in order of how much I liked them. And there's going to be a rank 0, so that'll only go to number 9. And after I made that ranking, I made some observations about myself and my own preferences based on the ranking that I made. So for one, I value attention to detail first and foremost. If I feel like there are additional details being inserted into episodes, I respect that a lot. I've complained in the past on this channel about how in some of the longer series, you'll go several episodes where not very much is added, or the only thing that's explored is the individual episode's plot. And I find it impressive if a series is able to do more in the same amount of time, whether that's fleshing out individual species or giving additional detail to characters. In a comparison of 2 episodes where the crew goes to a planet that we're really only going to see the species once and never again, I'm more impressed if that species is more developed and has more flavor to it than if it doesn't. I really hate special boys. So Mary Sue's, Gary Stu's, but specifically, like if the story is trying to tell me that somebody is special, I hate that. I think I value respect of the audience first and foremost. So if I feel like the show is trying to intentionally get me to like someone, despite qualities that they have, I really am irritated. This is kind of a nebulous concept, so I'd say the 2 biggest offenders are specifically Wesley Crusher and Jonathan Archer. Those are the 2 characters that I think I'm the most irritated when the show tries to convince me that they're perfect. As an extension of the attention to detail thing, I'm also impressed by efficiency and the ability to do more with less. I don't just want more details about the species. I'm also impressed if the story attempts to be more. If you attempt drama and humor instead of just being funny or just being dramatic. I'm impressed if you try to tell a lot of different types of stories. This isn't totally necessary, and I've said many times that I do love filler, but I'm impressed if the filler has more to it. I do value percent goodness, so I've said before that I think Star Trek needs to have bad parts, but if we're going 10 to 15 episodes and there's only 1 or 2 good episodes in that run, it does start to make me think that the season or the series overall is not good. I also value creativity, brilliance, and uniqueness. If I feel that a series is trying to be overly safe or bland, I don't like it. All of this is subjective, all of this is only my personal taste. One of the people in my watch group, his biggest deciding factor of how much he likes an episode is how many explosions there are, and that's fine. This is just my personal ranking. But the last thing I want to highlight as we go into our rank 0 very best entry is I value genuineness. I've talked before on this channel about how I found out that a lot of the writers on Enterprise specifically had not actually watched the series when they were writing the episodes, and how this made me lose a lot of respect for a lot of what I was seeing. In fact, before Terry Matalas's whole era, it was mostly expected that writers were not fans. There were a couple of true Star Trek fans among the writing staff, but for the most part, they were looking for people who were objective, which is certainly a strategy, but I think that works better for a series that is not like Star Trek. In Star Trek, you need to have an understanding of people's expectations, but also just plain an understanding of the story. You need to remember what has come before, know whether it worked or whether it didn't, and generally have inspiration for the kinds of stories you want to bring to the table. Star Trek's been going on for a really long time, and it can absolutely grow stale if you don't have passion behind the project. So if I perceive that the people working on a particular episode or show don't give a shit, I am lost. But conversely, if I feel that the people involved really truly care, I care more as well. Because the thing is, Star Trek matters to people. More than that, Star Trek matters to the world. So many things have been invented because they happened first in Star Trek. Cell phones, tablets. But we're still trying to imitate Star Trek. The United States has a Space Force now, and the logo looks close enough to Starfleet that you can believe they want it to one day be the Starfleet logo. In 2024, we are supposed to have, according to Star Trek, the Bell Riots, the riots that eventually plunge us into civil war that becomes World War III. And that is really scary, but it's also a comfort, because we as humans, both in society and in science and in the government, have decided that we're going to try to do Star Trek. Not the World War III part, but we're going to go for that utopia, even if it means the hardship comes first. Again, not that we should go for the hardship first. So the question is, for the people who participate in Star Trek, do you have a responsibility to care? Do the writers have a responsibility to watch all of those episodes and understand the story and understand where people are coming from when they watch it? If you're an actor, do you have a responsibility to be that person that people believe you are? Do you have a responsibility to try to be better if you as a person don't live up to the character that you're playing? Just in the past couple of days on the Star Trek subreddit, I've seen people discussing the actors who work in Star Trek. Some of them care a lot, some of them don't care very much. I've said before that I've always really respected Jolene Blalock, who pursued a role acting on Enterprise because she had been a huge fan of the original series, and she tried to model T'Pol after Spock. But there's also people like Colm Meaney, who played Chief O'Brien. He's not a Star Trek fan, and he's said so publicly many times. He played in hundreds, I think, of episodes of Star Trek total, but he was never passionate about it, but he at least respects that he's part of it. He respects what it means to people, and he respects that it has frankly contributed a lot to his life in return. And then there's Robert Beltran. I didn't know this about Robert Beltran until recently, but Robert Beltran hates Star Trek. He played Chakotay, the first officer on Voyager, and everybody always says that his character was never adequately explored and they should have done more with him. And yes, part of this comes from the fact that his character was supposed to be Native American, and the Native American advisor for Voyager was a fake who was just lying to them. But I found out recently that according to many of Robert Beltran's crew members, well, fellow crewmates, he hated Star Trek. He refused to memorize lines, and he especially refused to memorize like monologues or anything that could be difficult to do. And he had a lot of contempt for the fans, so it became difficult to write for him because you couldn't give him complex things to do. Fans have reported that during Voyager's run, Robert Beltran was rude and dismissive and showed contempt for the fact that he had to be in Star Trek. But now, recently, he's played a pivotal role in Prodigy, and a lot of people are wondering, wouldn't it have been better if you had given his role to someone who was happy to be here? So recently, this dichotomy has become really interesting to me. What do you do with somebody like Robert Beltran, who doesn't value Star Trek, who isn't trying to be Chakotay, who doesn't respect his fans, and who doesn't respect the story he's selected to be a part in? Because there is an argument that it's not important. The show will exist independently of Robert Beltran and, anyone else who is like him far after they are known for being on it. Should we allow the story to be different because of what happens in real life? Or is it insulting to real life to put the story first? So to some extent, the actors and the story are completely intertwined. They're inseparable. And that's always been the story of Star Trek. And for that reason, all of the other series I've ranked can fluctuate. Maybe future seasons of TNG will make me like it more, or maybe Voyager will no longer impress me. But I think Galaxy Quest will always be rank 0 for me. To be honest, Galaxy Quest benefits a lot from being a standalone feature film. It's very short. They don't have to build it to last. But the result is, it's perfect. The acting and casting choices are perfect. The balance between parody and homage is perfect. The pacing is perfect. The balance between comedy and drama is also perfect. It's actually likely that nothing can ever surpass it because of the conditions under which it was made, which is that it doesn't have to try to conform to the greater lore of Star Trek. It doesn't have to try to start any kind of series. There was supposed to be a series that was made out of it, but that wasn't really what they had in mind when they made the movie. It is rank 0 and not rank 1, partially because it is not actually part of the Star Trek canon. It is its own thing. But I watched this movie for the 9th time this morning, and this is the only movie I can think of that legitimately gets better every time I watch it. It used to get better because I noticed more details or understood the story better, but this year it got better because I have seen more Star Trek. It's unbeatable. So let's move on to rank 1, an actual Star Trek series. The thing about this series is that it doesn't necessarily have much in the way of meat and potatoes, but it has so much brilliance, it has so much detail and efficiency that I have to consider it better than everything else. Every episode has at least an A and B plot and progresses at least 2 or 3 characters, but most of them do more, and they do more in less time. Star Trek Lower Decks may actually be shorter overall than the first season of most Star Trek series, but it has the best cast, I think, overall. It's explored the most stories. It's introduced a whole lot of concepts. It may not introduce as many concepts as something like TNG, which is 170 something episodes, but for what it has, it's incredibly dense. It feels like eating a series of desserts made by a master pastry chef. I'll be honest, Lower Decks does have a couple of problems. The plot of Lower Decks is, I think, actually the least interesting of any of the other series plots. Not that it's bad, but that it is not as good. But it has a huge amount of detail, a huge amount of jokes, and I believe it has the largest cast of characters that are actually developed. There is not anyone on Lower Decks that I'm not looking forward to seeing. Any episode could be about any character, and I would be satisfied. I am going to highlight a couple of its problems. For one, the first several episodes are difficult to get through. The dialogue is very shouty, and the show expects you to calibrate to it rather than it actually getting better. On top of that, you can't even skip ahead to later episodes if you're showing a new viewer because it won't make any sense. Finally, it's worth noting that while the show is wonderful to binge, watching it week by week certainly felt worse. Each episode is funnier and less dramatic, so they do feel like they don't hit as hard plot-wise if you're watching it once a week. I feel that Lower Decks is a show that could maybe benefit from dropping the episodes more often. I also figured that for each of the series, I would go over my favorite and least favorite episode and compare those to the best and worst IMDb scores. So for Lower Decks, there's really only one truly awful episode. And that's a mathematically perfect redemption, which is the Avatar parody in which an exocomp fucks an owl twice. I didn't even dislike this episode when I was watching it. I was just really confused. It's a deeply confusing episode. I will say that I think when I said I like everybody in the cast, I actually meant I like everybody in the Cerritos crew. I could not give a flying shit about Peanut Hamper, the exocomp, and every time they bring her back, I want her to go away. She had an arc this season, and I truly did not care. Other than that, though, I think the whole cast is great. Speaking of the whole cast, my favorite episode is Wej Douge. I've brought this up on this channel before, but Wej Douge is the second to last episode of season 2, an episode that manages a whopping 24 characters in 24 minutes. I think it's 24 characters. It's 5 separate plot lines on 5 separate ships participating in the same space battle. It also introduces T'Lyn and Ma'a, 2 characters who are so great in this one episode that they're brought back as recurring characters later. Honorable mention to Where Pleasant Fountains Lie, which is the episode in which Chief Engineer Billup's mom tries to get him to have sex, because I'm actually 12 years old, and I thought the episode was funny. Lower Decks is also the only series where the best and worst episodes actually lined up with my favorite and least favorite. A Mathematically Perfect Redemption is the lowest rated episode in the series, and Wej Douge is tied for the number 1 spot. The rest of the series are not going to be like this. Let's move on to rank number 2. I said that I appreciated Lower Decks for the brilliance, but it was a lot like eating a lot of dessert. The show that I chose as rank number 2, I believe, has just as much detail, but it also includes more of the meat and potatoes. It has more of a plot. It has a lot more emotional content. And a lot of the episodes are more serious, despite the fact that the two shows are very similar. In fact, I had a really hard time choosing between them. I just remember I was watching Lower Decks, and I had just finished season 3 of The Orville, and I thought nothing could ever pass season 3 of The Orville. And I was watching Lower Decks, and I went, holy shit, this is better than The Orville. So, number 2 has to go to The Orville. But the distinction between them is so minor as to be inconsequential. I'll go ahead and address, is this Star Trek? Yes. It was written by Seth MacFarlane and Brannon Braga. Brannon Braga wrote a whole lot of Star Trek, and Seth MacFarlane was on 2 episodes of Enterprise as a random engineer. So, in my mind, it's absolutely Star Trek, but it was clearly intended to be Star Trek. Famously, it was originally designed as a series for Star Trek, but Seth MacFarlane was denied by Paramount or whoever, and he decided to make his own Star Trek with blackjack and hookers. That is The Orville. The Orville is a full series rewrite of Star Trek. It's like being given a 7-course meal with ingredients that were grown in the farmer's backyard. Everything is made from scratch. They started from almost ground level and re-examined a bunch of concepts like, is it better storytelling if we don't have the transporter? What do we like about the Vulcans? What makes the Vulcans good story elements? And what are we going to carry from that forward into this new iteration? In almost every case where the Orville examines what to change about Star Trek, the difference is either the same or an improvement. The Union is explored more directly than the Federation is, and the viewers understand more about what is going on in the Union at any given time than you're expected to in Star Trek proper. The new species do resemble Star Trek species, but they are all entirely new and different. They all bring forward ideas that were either not explored or not adequately explored when they were originally brought up in Star Trek. The central conceit of the Orville is obviously that the captain and first officer are a divorced couple who are assigned to the same starship because of a staffing issue, and this seems like a silly gag, but not only is their relationship explored very satisfyingly, it also sets the tone for the overall theme of the story, which is the intersection of professional and personal life. Every character has a satisfying and interesting arc, well, unless it's not satisfied because the series never finished, but beside the point. Every character's arc has to do with the way their family life intersects with their work on the Orville. And I find that interesting, and also the fact that there is a central theme to the characters means that the stories can be more direct and more poignant. I will say, of course, the Orville is not perfect. It did not achieve rank 0 or rank 1. It does have a couple of problems. For one, I would say a lot of the episodes are pretty medium. It is good that it has a very low number of terrible episodes, but it has a lot of episodes that fall in the middle. The reason this can be a problem is because in season 3 we go to an 84-minute episode format, or up to 84 minutes, and none of those episodes, or I think only one of them, has a B-plot. An 84-minute episode with no B-plot can feel amazing if done well, but the ones that are weaker feel excruciatingly long and occasionally pointless. I also praise the fact that the whole cast of the Orville is utilized better than most, but as the series goes on, it stops finding it important to include people in other characters' stories, so it feels like some people's storylines get very condensed and insular. Finally, the moral compass of the show does occasionally suffer. I appreciate the fact that Ed, the captain, is frequently allowed to be shown to be wrong. However, the rules are basically never shown to be wrong. Ed and his crew are always in the right if they are following the rules, and anyone who isn't following the rules is bad or stupid. I don't always love this. It does lead to a couple of episodes having incoherent or unsatisfying morality. But overall, while this problem is kind of systemic, it only comes up every once in a while. I would say the worst episode is Primal Urges. I did have to go back through the series and find one that I actively didn't like, but I do remember that I didn't enjoy Primal Urges. It's actually a very good episode, but it's about Bortus developing a sex addiction, and we see a whole lot of naked Moclan men in the holodeck, and I don't enjoy the experience of watching it. It's a good exploration of marital problems, but I don't like looking at it with my eyes. It is also the lowest rated episode of The Orville on IMDb. My favorite episode is A Tale of Two Topas. It is an 84-minute episode, one of the longest in the series, in season 3, and it does not have a B-plot, and it is, like, in my mind, the example of how you do an episode that is very long with only one plot line and do it well. I had to give this title to this episode because I cried a lot both times I watched it. Of course it wins. But the top rated episode is Domino, season 3, episode 9, which achieves its top ranking because it has a really big space battle. And you know what? I will admit, that's a really cool space battle. I can't argue with Domino being number 1. On IMDb, A Tale of Two Topas has a 7.9, and Domino sits at a 9.1. I gave rank 0 to Galaxy Quest for genuineness. I gave rank 1 to Lower Decks for brilliance and uniqueness. I gave rank 2 to The Orville for body of work. And I have to give rank 3 to Prodigy for ambition. Prodigy is probably the most ambitious Star Trek project on this list from a writing standpoint. Potentially even more ambitious than Galaxy Quest. It needs to appeal to adults and children. It needs to explain the entire plot up to this point for new fans and satisfyingly progress the story of Voyager, which is widely considered to be Star Trek's weakest story. It also has to introduce a new society, flesh out 5 other existing species while moving forward the most ambitious plot in the shortest time. All of this with 9 recurring characters, each of whom get an episode and a half dedicated to developing them. It does most of this well, but not all. Many of the more childish jokes could be cut without sacrificing the core audience. Some of the jokes are like inserting the word "but" randomly into a sentence, and other things that I don't think really add anything for even the smaller children. There's also a bit of a problem where the story buckles under the weight of its own complexity. There are obvious band-aids that occasionally hold certain aspects of the story together. It also has this odd show-don't-tell problem where they want you to notice more when you go back and watch things again or when you think about it, and so they layer the story a whole lot. They do it so well, though, that a lot of important components of the story are really only noticeable if you are paying a whole lot of attention. For example, the motivation of the main villain, which had to be explained to me by a Reddit post. Once I read that Reddit post, the whole series made a whole lot of sense, and I'm genuinely really, really excited to find out more. But I think it may be trying to be a little bit too smart in some aspects. That may sound a little bit whiny, but if I'm watching every episode twice and taking notes and there are things that I don't notice, there are definitely things that most people are not noticing. That's not me bragging about how much attention I pay. That's me acknowledging that I do pay more attention than the average person who just turns this on because they scroll past it on Netflix. Most of all, I do think it should be noted that this is a series for kids. It really only appeals to people who enjoy animation and the kind of person who can tolerate children's media in the first place. This series and Lower Decks are the 2 series among the entirety of Star Trek that I think can't be recommended purely on the basis of liking Star Trek. If somebody really enjoys Picard, I don't think I would recommend Prodigy to them, although I would recommend just about anything else. But overall, I would say that Prodigy's strengths far, far outweigh its weaknesses. I kept qualifying Prodigy's high placement on this list with things like Prodigy gets an unfair advantage because it tells a really coherent story. And Prodigy gets an unfair advantage because the last episode is so epic. It left a really positive taste in my mouth. But the bush I realized I was beating around is that Prodigy deserves to be this high on the list because it rules. It is actually that good, and it is indeed better than quite a bit of Star Trek in many ways. It manages to tell episodic stories that meaningfully progress both the plot and the characters every week. The ship and robot designs are genuinely sick, and after I finished it, I went to 4 separate social media platforms to post about how awesome it was. I was actually kind of mad when I realized that I was genuinely excited to see the plot unfold in season 2, because the plot is basically a temporal coldish war, or a temporal lukewarm war, and I had just finished the temporal Cold War arc in Enterprise, which is the most insultingly idiotic non-story I've ever seen, and I kept making excuses for it, and then Prodigy cleaned the floor with it with ease. The only thing I would actually say to qualify Prodigy's high ranking is that it is only 1 season. It is the shortest series on this list because it is only 20 half-length episodes long, and thus the length of the first 10 episodes of anything else. That means that it's entirely possible that the next season is terrible, which would suck, but it could happen. However, I don't think that's going to happen. I've spoken before on this channel about how I stopped watching The Legend of Korra in season 2 because season 1 told a complete story, and then season 2 had to roll back everybody's character development so that they could start over, so they could keep telling the story. And I really hated that. And the character development in season 1 of Prodigy was so good, I was terrified that it was going to be The Legend of Korra, and we were going to have to make everybody childish and insufferable all over again in order to continue having a series. But I think we've actually already seen what a key change looks like for this set of writers, because season 1 of Prodigy actually contains 2, like a part A and a part B. That's episodes 1 through 10 and episodes 11 through 20, which cover basically 2 separate plots. It's the same arc, but the format of the episodes is different. The antagonist is different. The central conflict is different. So I think we've actually seen what the transition from season 1 to season 2 could look like. And I actually think these writers will be able to pull it off. I do think that the part 2 of Prodigy was weaker than part 1. It had stronger episodes and weaker episodes. But I think if that pattern continues, I will be very happy with what happens in the upcoming season. I've talked about this before, but my least favorite episode was All the World's a Stage. I think maybe I love Galaxy Quest and the Orville so much that this episode bugged me. I don't think that's it, though. I think it was just, there was a little bit of a cringe factor to it. Prodigy actually has 2 tribute episodes to the original series. The first one is Kobayashi, and the second one is All the World's a Stage. A lot of people didn't like Kobayashi. I loved it. Everybody loved All the World's a Stage except for me. So I don't feel the need to dump on it because it apparently achieved its objective, just not for me, which is fine. There's another widely beloved episode coming up in a different series that I really, really hate, and I think my reasons for complaining are a whole lot more legitimate. My favorite episode is easily Mindwalk, which happens near the end of the first season. I love this episode not only because it's very fun and very funny and sweet, but also because it took guts. The lead character in Prodigy, Dal, is the central gimmick of his character as a captain is like, what if you had a Starfleet captain who chose charisma as his dump stat, and almost everybody in universe immediately doesn't like him when they talk to him, but also the audience mostly doesn't like him either, especially like older members of the audience. And eventually you are supposed to be won over by him. And in this episode, he swaps bodies with Janeway, obviously an extremely beloved and respected character in Star Trek canon. And this episode only works if the audience has come to love Dal. And if they have not, if the writers have failed to endear the audience to this, I love this child, extremely annoying, irritating little shit, then the episode falls apart. And at this point, they had handled it. All of this is stuff I've already said in my Prodigy videos, but that's just my reasoning for it being my favorite. I would say if I had to give honorable mention to something else, it would be the following episode, Supernova, which is the series finale. It has an 8.7 and is the top rated episode on IMDb. Mindwalk has an 8.1. All the World's a Stage actually has an 8.2, which is higher than Mindwalk. I would also say that I really liked Cross the Roads. I really liked A Moral Star. Time of Mock is obviously a great episode. First Contact, Kobayashi. The Larry the Murder Planet two-parter is really, really good. And the premiere, the pilot, that was also really great. All of this to say that the superlative I would give Prodigy is that it has the highest ratio of excellent episodes. It does have a couple of duds. I didn't like Asylum. I didn't like the Borg episode, but it did grow on me. I didn't like Preludes. I didn't really like Ghost in the Machine. So it does have a couple of episodes that I didn't like. But the ratio of excellent episodes is way higher in Prodigy than it is in anything else. It's not close. Like I said, the Orville has the least bad episodes, but Prodigy has the most, by ratio, excellent episodes. Looks like the lowest rated episode is Starstruck, which that episode's a little mid, but it does have the fight in the vehicle replicator, which is I love the vehicle replicator. I'll stop. I could talk about how much I love the vehicle replicator for a very long time. Let's move on to rank 4. The series that I gave rank 4 is extremely close to my heart, but I couldn't rank it any higher. I want you to imagine that you're watching American Idol, and you're following American Idol for the full season. So you start with the first episode and you watch along as the episodes are being released. And there's a young contestant who she's young and she doesn't necessarily know everything, and she incorporates yodeling into her performance. And the yodeling is admittedly a little unconventional, but it is captivating. You grew up on country music, and so the yodeling is endearing to you. And maybe it's not endearing to everybody, but she quickly becomes your favorite and you're supporting her. But around the halfway mark, she starts to talk in interviews about how much she doesn't think she's as good as Kelly Clarkson, who won American Idol a long time ago. And more of her performances become all about Kelly Clarkson. She stops yodeling, she starts singing Kelly Clarkson songs, and then eventually, in the last round, she doesn't even show up and instead invites Kelly Clarkson to take her place. That's what it's like to watch Star Trek Enterprise. I would have been fine with yodeling. I love yodeling. When Enterprise has faith of the heart in itself, it's incredible. I love what Enterprise actually tries to do and tried to be. It depicts tense situations and characters that I always felt incredibly attached to. I love the kind of militaristic feel to it, but I also love how achievable the feel is. I love how their spaceship doesn't have all of the cushy things that the later ships do. They have to do more with less. They're struggling. But it's the sheer volume of things that Enterprise does so poorly that brings it down. T'Pol, as a character, has some of the best and deepest development across Star Trek, and she is, by the way, still my favorite character in all of Star Trek. That'll very likely not change ever. But other than T'Pol, everybody else's character development is severely lacking. The series concept of building up the Federation and the Prime Directive and all of the little things that they have in Star Trek is a fun and compelling idea, but the plot, the Temporal Cold War, is literally the dumbest thing I've ever seen on any television series ever. An intensely nonsensical, insultingly stupid non-story that never goes anywhere or means anything. The development of the relationship between Trip and T'Pol is one of the series' high points because it's genuinely really interesting to explore the idea of what the first Vulcan and human couple would look like. What kind of misunderstandings would they have? What kind of difficulties would they have from their culture and their assumptions? But half their dialogue sounds like it comes from a terrible porno. And there's a bunch of scenes where they're massaging each other, and that makes a whole lot of people stop watching. I've seen good sex scenes. I have taste. I'm not complaining about the presence of sex scenes. I'm complaining about the quality, and the quality is shit. The good parts of Enterprise are wonderful, but the bad parts take up a larger and larger proportion of Enterprise as the series goes on. But really, the only bad thing I actually care about is the show's insecurity. I don't really care that the sexy scenes are not good. I'm still gonna watch it, and I just roll my eyes, or close them in a couple of cases. But it's when the show gets so embarrassed of itself that it starts, like, self-immolating that I hate it. I don't hate the show, I hate the fact that it's doing this to itself. Season 1, for example, tells this charming story of Archer and T'Pol learning to work together. It has a couple of problems, but overall I think that arc is really strong. But the result was that T'Pol was really popular, and Archer kind of wasn't, so they dealt with this by making T'Pol worse instead of trying to make Archer better. And then for the rest of the series, there's this giant problem where every time, or nearly every time, Archer shares an episode with anyone else, it's about making that other person look bad in the pleading hope that the audience thinks Archer is cool. They could have just made Archer cool. They didn't have to make everybody else terrible. A single episode about Travis being poorly received doomed the writers to never even try to fix his character for the remainder of the show's run. They could have done something with it, but because his first episode went badly, he only ever got one other episode despite being on the bridge every week. I'm sorry, I gotta read this one verbatim because I love this phrasing that I came up with, by the way. I did see the H-Bomber Guy video. I want to assure everyone all of these melodramatic words came from my mind. Most damning of all is the show's final season, which starts as an apology for not being more about worshipping the original series and slowly spirals out of control into a melodramatic public seppuku ending with Rick Berman looking directly into the camera and apologizing for the show ever existing at all, while somehow simultaneously laughing at the audience for daring to care in the first place. I despised the ending of Enterprise, and it made me stop actually watching Star Trek for about 10 years. I felt that it was so disrespectful to me personally as a fan. I felt that the show was laughing at me for liking it, and it said that anybody who liked it was stupid. And so for 10 years, I actually did not watch any Star Trek other than Galaxy Quest and the Kelvinverse movies. I did watch the Kelvinverse movies a lot, though, I will say. The ending to Enterprise, which was the first Star Trek that I ever saw, made me feel that Star Trek itself did not care about me or about telling a good story. All this to say, by the way, I still love Enterprise. I've been slogging through season 4 for a long time, so all this vitriol is like kind of bustling around in there, but I love Enterprise. It's got my favorite ship. I also want to say that I have the most investment in Enterprise. When Enterprise has details, I am most interested in them. There isn't another series that I think I would be interested in actually continuing with the expanded universe that comes from it. I did read the Lower Decks comic about Shax, the security officer, and it was awesome. It's just 40 pages of him killing Klingons in a bunch of different ways. It's great. But if there were a bunch of novels about Lower Decks, I would not read them. I did not play the Prodigy video game, not only because I'm not the target audience, but also because I didn't want to. But Enterprise is the series I'm most invested in. I care the most. It is the closest to my heart. If I had to vote on which series gets a continuation or has a canon spin-off of some kind to clean up the story. Enterprise would definitely be my vote. It's the only one I really, truly actually care about seeing where it would go. I really enjoy watching Lower Decks, but if we, for example, abandon the current plot line and just do something else next season, I probably will not be too torn up about it. My least favorite episode was Twilight. I truly hate this episode. I hate any episode in which T'Pol randomly becomes a crybaby in order to make us believe that she can't function without Archer. And usually she's crying about how much she loves Archer. And I typically hate any episode that's like that. I respect a lot of things that Mike Sussman wrote, especially because he was actually a true Star Trek fan as a kid, but he also wrote all of my least favorite episodes of Enterprise, including Twilight. Twilight is the episode where Archer loses his memory, so T'Pol becomes the captain, accidentally dooms humanity by using her stupid woman brain to over-emotion herself into being a terrible captain. She's a Vulcan, by the way. If you haven't seen the show, she's a Vulcan, and in any episode written by this one guy, she becomes a real crybaby. In all the other episodes, she's basically a normal Vulcan. But anyway, so then T'Pol decides she no longer wants to command a starship or whatever and becomes Archer's nurse. And then for 12 years, she becomes his nurse. And I hate this episode. It's supposed to be like a love story. Side note, Archer and T'Pol are not love interests in any other episode, really. And this episode was supposed to show like the stakes of the season and show that the bad guys are serious. They might blow up Earth. But it is actually the highest rated episode of Enterprise. But I don't like it because I don't think that Alzheimer's is romantic. I've said this before on my episode about this topic, but I thought the romanticization of Alzheimer's in this episode didn't feel true to life, didn't feel like the real human experience, and I really felt uncomfortable watching it. That on top of the way that it really, like I said, turned T'Pol into a crybaby in order to make Archer look cooler. I hate this. I hate this episode. I hate it. I hate this episode. My favorite episode is actually 2 episodes later, Similitude, which is the one where Archer and Phlox clone Trip in order to harvest the clone's brain. This episode pissed off a lot of people, but the reason I like this episode is because it does not try to gaslight me into believing that Archer is a perfect person. Archer makes a lot of morally complex calls throughout the series, but a lot of times the show pretends that it was the right thing to do and that it wasn't complex. I'm okay with Archer making complex decisions. I want the show to acknowledge that it was complex, and this is one of the few episodes that actually does that. It also features a bunch of plot lines about various people in the ship's relationship with Trip, and relationship with what would happen if Trip were to die, that kind of thing. It also has a bunch of deleted scenes that really, really add to the show. And it features a kid actor for a young Trip who blows this performance out of the water. Like, he just did really, really good. I watched that episode 3 times in a row and cried more every time. It's a fantastic episode. Honorable mentions, my other least favorite episode. So I really hate the 7th, but I also really hate, I believe the episode after Similitude is Carpenter Street. Hang on, let me check. Enterprise episode guide. Yep, the episode after Similitude is Carpenter Street. It's just a really dumb and weird episode in which Archer and T'Pol go back in time and, torture this guy. He works at a blood bank, but he has to like kidnap people to harvest their blood. it's it's Carpenter Street might actually be like objectively the worst episode of Enterprise because that episode sucks. But yes, there's other good episodes. I liked Singularity and Catwalk. Shuttlepod 1 was really good. Man, I'm looking at the list of episodes as I rank them, and Enterprise has a lot of bad episodes. I love it though. I love Enterprise. It's my soul Star Trek series. Prodigy is better though. Maybe I should read you the. I feel I was so mad watching season 4. I feel like maybe I should read out this thing that I wrote because I was so angry. I watched the first couple episodes of season 4, then I watched Prodigy, then I watched Enterprise, and I wrote this. I did not intend to share this. This is Pomegranate. I'm a good example for children. So I never intended to share this because I didn't want to be overly negative in my reviews of Enterprise or Prodigy. But since I'm doing my year wrap-up, I figure this is as good a thing to add in as any. When I say pomegranate, by the way, I mean it's non-alcoholic. It's carbonated juice. So I wrote this because I was feeling frustrated, just to illustrate how I was feeling. As I am watching Star Trek's Prodigy and Enterprise Season 4 at the same time, it's tempting to compare the two series. After all, Prodigy was designed to replace Enterprise as the first in Star Trek's intended viewing order. While one is a children's animated program for streaming and the other is classic primetime episodic television, there are obvious similarities between the two. Both series follow an entirely green crew, unfamiliar with their ship, traversing a generally cruel galaxy as underdogs, and indeed nearly all of the plot points and ideas addressed in Enterprise were revisited or reimagined in Prodigy. However, I have come to the conclusion that the differences between these two series makes it unfair to compare them directly. The assumptions about the audience and viewing style result in products that are entirely dissimilar. One of the series writes for an audience that it believes is too immature to understand the nuances of common science fiction philosophy, one too childish to comprehend basic science and the movements of multiple episode plots, and takes advantage of the audience's assumed lack of intelligence to skate around answering questions or addressing obvious implications in the hope that no one will notice the questions were asked in the first place. It orchestrates what appears to be large plot movements and ship battles to fascinate viewers with low attention spans, but forgets what happened the previous episode and assumes the audience will as well. It forgoes genuine character work in favor of cameos from previous Star Trek series for the sake of nostalgia, in the hopes of neglecting lasting development for just a little bit longer. The other series, of course, is computer animated. I do love Enterprise, though. But we're going to move on to our rank number 5. Now, I want you to understand that the complex feelings I have for Enterprise place it high, but that does not, or place it near the middle, but that does not mean that everything that comes after this is bad. In fact, I think many of the series that come after this have fewer problems than Enterprise. It's just that my attachment to Enterprise places it closer to the top relative to the series that have a lot of things wrong with them. Number 5 is Voyager. I can't really beat around the bush with this one. The thing is, I'm watching Voyager with my family. Every time I go home and visit my family, we watch a little bit of Voyager, and for that reason, we just finished episode 10. I have seen a couple of episodes from later in order to understand what was going on in Prodigy or to keep up with the memes, but I haven't seen most of it, so I guess I just have to say that I love what I've seen in Voyager. I do love the more militaristic feel. Most of the other series take the route of making their crews flawed with relatively small problems like Lower Decks or Prodigy, or making the ship superhumanly competent with problems that they solve easily so that it shows how easily they solve the problems. But I love Voyager because it shows an extremely competent crew that genuinely has big problems to solve. Along the same lines as Lower Decks and Orville, I'm genuinely excited to see any episode about anybody except maybe Neelix. I am a little bit with the bandwagon on that one. I don't really like Neelix. I don't. But maybe he'll grow on me. I would be lying if I said that Janeway wasn't my favorite captain. I have found in my life that I tend to get the most inspiration, like a disproportionate amount of inspiration from women in science fiction and even particularly Star Trek. I find that I don't gain almost anything from, say, the women in Marvel, which I was a huge Marvel fan until fairly recently. So that's not to say that Marvel isn't inspiring or that I wasn't attached to it, just that I didn't gain the same benefits from representation from Marvel that I did from Star Trek. And in general, science fiction, women tend to be more inspiring to me directly, and specifically Star Trek. Like, I love Ellen Ripley, obviously, but I don't really see myself in her. But I do feel like if I try really hard one day, I might be able to be like Janeway, and that's meaningful to me. And I understand that Janeway has problems, but I would take 1,000,000 episodes about Janeway over 3 episodes about Jonathan Archer. 3 bad episodes about Jonathan Archer, I'll be fair. But Janeway is someone who has to do the hard things and has to make the hard choices, but is also someone that I can look up to. And I don't feel like I really try, or most of the captains I don't feel like I can look up to or would want to look up to. My other favorite captain is probably Captain Mercer, or Ed from the Orville. I also love Captain Freeman from Lower Decks, but she's a mess, and I love watching her be a mess. I also love watching Dal be a mess. He's not really... I don't think he counts, though. However, because I've only seen about 14 episodes, I think, I can't really rate it any higher than this. I have to say I empathize with the viewers who were disappointed that it couldn't live up to the promise of counting torpedoes. They acknowledge that they're having issues that they need to solve, but because of the time and because of the way television was handled, they couldn't actually count torpedoes or count how many shuttles that they lost and stuff like that. And Prodigy does try to address these problems. They have the vehicle replicator, which is definitely a retcon, but that's okay. But Prodigy also tries to... Prodigy is, by the way, the sequel to Voyager. That's why I'm kind of putting them together, if you didn't know that. Prodigy does do this thing where I was actually able to track every episode where they gained equipment or lost equipment, and it's much more minor than it seems like it will be in Voyager, but there's a very consistent sense of they don't have transporters until they learn what transporters are, and then they figure out how to use it and that kind of stuff, where you have that specificity that people wanted out of Voyager. And I can empathize with wanting that and not getting it, but I also recognize that at the time, that kind of granularity was really not possible. I also know that it eventually does get exhausting to watch the day they get home repeatedly get shoved off, but I have not yet gotten to the point where that's exhausting. So, I'm fine with it. I do think it is more than possible that when I watch more of Voyager, it will pass Enterprise, or even its spawn Prodigy. Maybe it will even pass the Orville. The fact that the show is willing to make Janeway look bad, look imperfect, and also willing to show Janeway bending the rules and not always following regulation, means that potentially Voyager could pass the major gripe that I had with Orville, where the rules are always considered to be the thing everybody should be following, almost regardless of situation. Although, that one thing will not make or break the difference between the Orville and Voyager to me. I'm just saying, I've enjoyed what I've seen of Voyager enough that I think I could become that attached to it. I could think that it's better. The worst episode I've seen of Voyager is obviously Threshold. It's the one where, oh my gosh, I forgot to mention in Enterprise that the lowest rated episode of Enterprise is obviously These Are the Voyages, the finale. But other than that, it's Extinction, which was Brannon Braga's attempt to remake Threshold. Threshold was an episode that Brannon Braga wrote of Voyager, where Tom Paris gets turned into a salamander, and then he like turns Janeway into a salamander, and they have babies, and it's weird. It's ridiculous. It's the lowest. I think it's the lowest rated episode of Voyager, but I kind of don't care. We're just gonna move on to the best episode of Voyager, or my favorite. My favorite episode of Voyager is obviously Threshold. I love this episode so much. In it, Tom Paris gets turned into a salamander, and he like kidnaps Janeway, and they go really fast, and they turn into salamanders, and they have salamander babies. I've had a really bad year so far. I'm kind of on the edge. I hope this episode is tolerable to watch. Anyway, Threshold is my favorite episode of Voyager, and it's not close. I actually timed this episode to release it on the anniversary of its release. Happy Threshold Day if you're watching this. I've seen other episodes. I think Hope and Fear is the highest rated one that I've seen, because that's the one where they introduced the Dauntless, which makes an appearance in Prodigy and stuff. I don't really care. The lowest rated episode I've seen is The Cloud, which also I don't care. I love Voyager enough to not care what people think. Alright, so let's move on to rank number 6. Again, rank number 6 is not bad. I love Star Trek, and I'm ranking the Star Trek, so just because something is in the bottom half doesn't mean I don't like it. There's this Futurama quote that goes something like, Star Trek, 90 episodes, about 30 good ones. And I have largely found that to be the truth about the original series. There's a lot of time that I'm watching it where I wish I could move on to the next episode, or I wish I could go on to the next scene. I can see why this changed the world. It's incredibly charming. It's captivating. The stories are really, really strong. I think the individual episode concepts in the original series are unmatched among any of the other series. It's not close. I recently watched A Taste of Armageddon, which is an episode about these two planets that are at war with each other, but they found that the destruction was so extreme that they could only sustainably be at war for 500 years if they had the computers simulate the war, and then they just had enough people agree to commit suicide to simulate the war. And it was absolutely fascinating. It was the kind of the kind of science fiction concept that we've sort of moved away from. I don't want to say that that what's new is bad or anything. Like, The Expanse is obviously an incredible piece of sci-fi, but I do feel like a lot of modern sci-fi doesn't try to go for this pure conceptual storytelling anymore. And that is something that I really appreciate about the original series of Star Trek. It's notable that this is the only series that doesn't try to do any kind of character development. From what I understand, there is a little bit more of that later in the movies. I have seen the first 3 movies, but I'm not going to really talk about those because I watched those a long enough time ago that I feel it would be more beneficial if I watched them again. But it's more about watching these charming and dedicated people go through their lives, and it works. I do find watching them to be captivating. And because each episode's concept is interesting, I am satisfied every time I finish an episode, even if the execution is bad. However, it's not without fault. Most of the unenjoyable parts come from, frankly, an extremely outdated portrayal of women that is very difficult to get over. Like I said, I was able to get over almost all of the really weird sexuality in Enterprise, but I happened to I watched some of the episodes out of order, just because like downloads didn't work, and it ended up just worked out that way. And I ended up accidentally watching 2 episodes in a row in which an otherwise totally competent female officer revealed that she had actually secretly wanted to be a princess the whole time, and the bad guy of the episode turned her into a princess, and then she was really sad when she had to go back to being a Starfleet officer at the end of the episode. Come on. Like, I love wearing fancy dresses, but Starfleet... I remember it was specifically a really jarring transition to me that I was watching... I think I was watching The Squire of Gothos, which is an episode where Uhura can play the piano. Well, she can play several instruments. And I love Uhura. This is not a complaint about Uhura. But she was enchanted to play the piano for the entertainment of the men, and she loved it. And I remember watching, and then I watched a little bit of Prodigy, and I remember it feeling so refreshing that Gwyn, the female lead in Prodigy, is not required by the story to be charming. She's kind of a bitter jerk. And it was so nice because for a lot of Star Trek, the women are charming, even if they are not seen as a commodity to have on the starship so that there are women around who can play music. Troy is beautiful and charming. Even to an extent, Janeway is... Janeway's a different case because she's the captain. She has to be charismatic. But obviously T'Pol is on the bridge so that she can be beautiful, and Hoshi is charming. And it's not until we get into the more recent Star Trek where some of the women are mean and they don't exist to be hostesses. And it's difficult to watch some episodes of Star Trek, the original series, because as progressive as it is, it's rough. It's rough. The other thing is that it does suffer from the Enterprise Season 3 problem where it doesn't have B-plots. So since the episodes are slightly longer and they don't have B-plots, if the episode sucks, it feels worse. Most TNG episodes have an A-plot and a B-plot, and it's rare that they are both terrible. So at least there's a good component. But in the original series, there aren't B-plots, or at least I don't think I've seen any B-plots. So everything rides on that one main plot. So I did watch The Trouble with Tribbles, which is an episode from Season 2, which I skipped ahead to watch before the Peregrine launch, where the ashes of several members of the original series were launched into space. I did watch The Trouble with Tribbles to sort of commemorate that for myself. And that is my favorite episode, but I'm going to count that one separately because I skipped ahead to that one, and it is considered to be the best series. Well, I think it's considered to be the best episode of the entire series, so I'm going to count that one separately. I think my least favorite episode... I really didn't like Chartley X, which is where a 17-year-old boy gains the psionic ability to create anything and destroy anyone that comes from IMDb. That one's not good. It's not. Or I didn't like it anyway. I also didn't like Shore Leave or The Squire of Gothos. Both of those happen to be episodes in which... Those are the 2 episodes in which the female officers turn into princesses, but I didn't like them. The Squire of Gothos is about like a guy who must have inspired Q, and I never really found Q's antics to be particularly captivating. And Shore Leave is about everybody going to a planet in which they hallucinate. Okay. As far as episodes I really liked the Corbomite maneuver. I really liked Menagerie, which is the one that introduces Pike. It's a recycle of the pilot. And where they take the footage from the pilot and then turn it into a whole episode. And I really liked the Galileo 7. I really, really liked A Taste of Armageddon. And I just watched Errand of Mercy. Errand of Mercy is really good as well. That's the one that introduces the Organians, who are a sort of all-knowing incorporeal species that are so powerful that they're like on a completely different playing field in it, and they really make Kirk look bad. Not that I want Kirk to look bad, but Kirk is sort of a stand-in for humanity, and this episode sort of highlights some of humanity's shortcomings, and I liked it a lot. Of the episodes I've seen, the highest, other than The Trouble with Tribbles, the highest rated I think is Space Seed. No, it's Balance of Terror, and the lowest rated is it's Mud's Women. I wasn't a huge fan of Mud's Women, but I didn't hate it. So I guess my tastes are pretty aligned with IMDb on this one. So I watched Galaxy Quest for the 9th time this morning, like I said, but I watched Star Trek 2009 in theaters 3 times and at home probably 13 or 14 times. The year that movie came out on DVD, I got it for Christmas, and I probably came close to wearing it out. I loved that movie. I can recite a whole lot of it to you. These movies, the JJ Trek, they're exciting and stylish and fun. These movies saved Star Trek. If it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't have gotten Discovery, which obviously takes a lot of visual inspiration from Star Trek 2009. Strange New Worlds, which has the same visuals, Prodigy or Lower Decks or Picard. None of this entire new age of Trek would have been possible if it wasn't for the fact that J.J. Abrams made Star Trek interesting and cool again. I just watched the Cinema Therapy episode on Star Trek 2009, and I have not watched Star Trek 2009 since I became more analytical about media, so I didn't know that it had more depth to it than shooty, but these movies are a whole lot of fun, and they're exciting, and people want to watch them. The only thing is that the reason I can't give it a higher rating is because although I have seen the first movie in the teens number of times, I never watched Into Darkness or Beyond after I saw them in theaters the first time. Not that I hated them, but I was not captivated the way I was the first time with the first movie. I thought they were fine, and I didn't feel the itch to watch them over and over again. I remember character-specific details about Beyond, but I don't remember the plot at all. I remember that there's a motorcycle, and I think they play Sabotage at the bad guys. Neat. Apparently, Trekkies didn't like the first movie, but they did like the latter 2 movies. I was not a real Trekkie at the time because I thought that Trek thought that it was too cool for me, so I didn't want to watch it because Enterprise. And I preferred the first one. So it seems to me, I could be wrong, it seems to me that the whole trilogy doesn't necessarily appeal to anybody. You know, it's one thing if, let's say, there's only a subset of Star Trek fans who can really enjoy Lower Decks or Orville or Prodigy. But at least it's not like the first 2 seasons of Lower Decks are one way, and then the latter 2 seasons of Lower Decks are really serious and appeal to a completely different audience. That's kind of what this feels like. Although the tone didn't change, I suspect that it was the case, and I think that was probably not great. Although, again, they did what they needed to do. They saved Star Trek. These movies gave Star Trek the boost it needed to be able to fight for itself, and now we're relying on the merit of the shows that are currently being released, rather than relying on the hype for the blockbuster movies. But we're getting to the last 2 entries, and this is where it really stops being dear to my heart, I guess. These are the things that I guess I would prefer to put on last. Like, if there was a new installment of anything else, I would probably prefer to watch it before this. Of the 2 that are left, the first one is Strange New Worlds. I have talked about this before, but there is something about Strange New Worlds that makes me not give a shit. It's beautiful. The individual episodes, I don't know what's wrong with them. I'm never really excited to watch the next episode the following week. I don't really participate in the Reddit discussions. I'm not theorizing. I'm not curious. And the thing is, I'm not sure what the problem is. Because from a purely objective standpoint, Strange New Worlds has a lot going for it. I think Pike is the best captain. I think it's really interesting that Pike is sort of the idealized manager today. Maybe not the ideal Star Trek captain, but he's who you would want to be your boss in an idealized, perfect world. The visuals are stunning. The costumes are awesome. The one thing that I will say, after every episode of Strange New Worlds, if there's a video about the costuming, I watch those. The music is fantastic. I love the opening, and I love the little twist on the original series opening theme that the opening has. But there's something about the heart of Strange New Worlds that is not captivating to me. Last season ended on a massive cliffhanger, and I don't think I cared at all. Spock is a character that is absolutely captivating. He captivated the world when he was first introduced in the original series, and I was just about equally captivated by Zachary Quinto. I was a teenage girl, by the way, when Zachary Quinto became Spock, but that's beside the point. I think Zachary Quinto is compelling, but I don't find Ethan Peck compelling, and I don't think it's Ethan Peck's fault, because I feel that way about everybody. I think the most compelling, captivating performance is delivered by Celia Rose Gooding as Uhura. Uhura is the heart of the ship. She's charming, and I'm excited to and happy to see her. But even the most charming character, Uhura, to me does not hold a candle to the original series Uhura. And I am definitely not just caving to nostalgia, because I watched Strange New Worlds first. I mean, after the 2009 movies. I watched Strange New Worlds before I watched any of the original series other than Wrath of Khan. So I was not at all attached to the original performances or the visuals or anything that you would think is what I'm attached to. I just don't find it as compelling. It's kind of bland to me. The only character I was truly excited to see again died the episode after I started to like him. I enjoyed the series well enough while I'm watching it, but I never find myself hungry for more. That being said, there are some good episodes. I'll go ahead and say my least favorite episode was Memento Mori. I looked at the list. I could not remember this episode in the slightest. Zilch. So that one gets my worst. But my favorite episode is actually potentially my favorite episode in all of Star Trek. And that is the Elysian Kingdom, the storybook episode from Season 1, Episode 9, Episode 8. That, to me, is a perfect episode of television. It deals with Mbenga, but even though it's an episode about Mbenga, everybody also gets to share in the spotlight. It's an incredibly fun episode that also makes you cry. And after this, I didn't like any other Mbenga episodes. I mean, they're good, but I don't care about his... I mean, I understand that at the time it was really important that people were racist against Klingons, but I'm not compelled. There is something about the direction or the writing of the series that doesn't work on me. I don't hate it. There are other episodes I like. Obviously, I love the Lower Decks crossover. It was really great. There are fun moments. But it's not nearly my favorite. I do want to bring up, before I move on to the last series, so the top-rated episode of Strange New Worlds is A Quality of Mercy, which is like an alternate timeline thing, which is the season 1 finale. And it is a good episode. The lowest rated episode is actually the Elysian Kingdom. I'll try to put this screenshot in the I'll put the screenshot in the episode, but I looked it up just now on IMDb. This episode has a 6.2, which is several points lower than the second lowest rated episode of Strange New Worlds. The average Strange New Worlds episode is about an 8.4, 8.5, and the Elysian Kingdom is extremely low for Strange New Worlds. But you can actually see that it has a very high proportion of 1-star ratings, and that means brigading. That means people trying to manipulate the boats. You also get the same from an extremely high proportion of 10s, although it can be back and forth countered. You can see the same sort of thing in like A Tale of Two Topas, or any other episodes that's controversial. You'll see an unusually high proportion of 10s and 1s instead of more genuine numbers like 6, 7, 8. As you know, most IMDb scores fall between 6 and 8. So when you're looking for a legitimate score, you're typically expecting most of those scores to fall in the 6 to 8 range if the score is real. That's not to say that people shouldn't be able to give it a 1-star review. They should. Some episodes, like Enterprise's The Seventh, are genuinely terrible. But having an unusually high ratio of 1-star reviews shows that people hated something about the episode that is especially notable. And then finally, we're getting to our very last series. I respect what Star Trek The Next Generation does well, but its focus is what doesn't appeal to me. I watched Enterprise first, and in Enterprise, the characters are always struggling to survive. They have to lie and steal and beg in order to scrape by in a cruel universe that doesn't care about them. And then I watched The Next Generation, in which they cruise through space on their luxury starliner that kind of makes me think of the Axiom, the Axiom something from WALL-E, where you have no struggles. And I know that they do have struggles, but it feels like everything is easy. And I know that, so part of the appeal of The Next Generation, especially for children at the time, was the idea that we have progressed so far that we are truly in utopia. And The Next Generation tries to depict utopia. But I found it was over the edge of how much utopia I'm able to handle. Maybe handle is the wrong word. But far and away, the best character on The Next Generation is Data. Because Data is the only character who consistently actually struggles with something. I feel like a lot of episodes end up being a parade of how perfect and wonderful everybody is. Which I understand if you're watching weekly, after school, that's a lot of fun, but binging it feels like a slog. I don't feel that much vitriol for it. I do think I actually like The Next Generation more than Strange New Worlds, but I respect Strange New Worlds' craft and willingness to be silly enough to put it above TNG. Where the original series solves problems on a philosophical level, or even occasionally doesn't solve them because they show that humanity isn't ready to face this philosophical problem, instead it feels like we have to show that humanity is really enlightened and advanced, so Wesley and or Geordi has a technobabble solution to the problem. And I don't like that. I would rather see a taste of Armageddon with a very interesting philosophical problem that has a philosophical solution. I think this may come from the fact that I'm an engineer, and so I'm constantly surrounded by technobabble solutions. So I, of course, have the disposition to want to watch Star Trek, but I have an appreciation for the solutions that are not technobabble. That's just a theory, though. I think it's also notable that there's a lot of concepts that couldn't meaningfully be explored because of the format. For example, I think the character that kind of sets the tone for the way episodes are going to be faced is Troy. Troy is obviously the character that is best suited to the themes and ideas of the Next Generation, because the Next Generation is about emotional enlightenment and, the ideas that you get out of therapy. But Troy is so well suited to the story that we can't allow her to participate. And Troy was the character I was most interested in when I started watching it, because I actually started watching The Next Generation in my freshman year of college, which leads me to the worst episode. I got up to A Measure of a Man, and I watched it basically every day for a while. I got up to The Measure of a Man, and I loved it. I cried a whole lot. I love Data. I love robots. I love any story about robots. I cried when I watched another Measure of a Man. It's a great episode. The episode after that is The Dauphine, and it took me 7 years to get through The Dauphine. I hate The Dauphine. I think The Dauphine has to get my award for the worst episode in all of Star Trek, because it specifically it tripped me up for 7 years. I don't like it. Basically, it's an episode in which Wesley meets this princess from this other planet, and they bat their eyelashes at each other, and it's not even any worse than any other Wesley episode. I was so over it. But I was also cringing really hard, and I did not get through it for 7 years. I would every couple of months, I would turn it on, I would watch like 30 seconds and turn it off. I hate this episode. I hate it so much that it became a meme in my friend group, and somebody got me a Wesley Crusher figurine that currently sits on my desk at work. Because my hatred of Wesley is so deep, it became well known. I don't actually hate Wesley Crusher. I hate the Dauphine. But to a small extent, I don't like Wesley. I don't like whenever he solves all the episode's problems. I don't like that. As a character, I think he's fine. I just don't like Wesley episodes. My favorite episode so far is Yesterday's Enterprise. I do want to say real quick, I watched Yesterday's Enterprise a week into 2024, so technically it doesn't count, and the episode that I liked best last year was The Survivors. But Yesterday's Enterprise is, I'll say it, it's better than The Elysian Kingdom. It's my favorite episode of Star Trek overall. It's fantastic. And I think that it also explains why I don't like TNG. I love Tasha Yar. I've said before, I like the militaristic feel of Enterprise and Voyager. I've mentioned before I was a huge Halo fan growing up. And I think that whatever part of the cast calculus Tasha was supposed to fill that was taken away when she left is what is missing from TNG to make it appeal to me. That's not to say that I loved Code of Honor or Skin of Evil or any other Tasha episode, but that what Tasha could have become is probably what would have made TNG beloved to me, and then it didn't happen. I do love Worf, but Worf is a very different character than Tasha. Oh well. I appreciate that Strange New Worlds kind of tried to re-examine Tasha's concept in La'an, but La'an is also a different character than Tasha in that she's much more fragile and sweet, and Tasha is closer to being... She's more of an obvious badass, I guess you could say. Like, she has more of a badass aura, where La'an is just very capable and knowledgeable, if that makes sense. I do think that my problems with the show having no problems might be, and is very likely to be, solved in later seasons, because I'm not even finished with season 3. So I did actually just get to the good part. But at this point, this year, at the end of 2023, this is where I have to rank it. Of what I've seen so far, the highest rated episodes are The Measure of Man and Yesterday's Enterprise. Yesterday's Enterprise having the highest, which like I said, I totally believe is deserved. It's a very, very good episode. I really, really enjoyed it. And the lowest rated episode is Shades of Grey, which is deserved. It sucks. It's funny that in all of Star Trek, including the Orville, episodes that feature Jonathan Frakes as an actor have a decent chance of being terrible or dragging the episode down, but episodes where Jonathan Frakes are directing tend to be really, really great. So I expected this video to be about 20 minutes long, and it was not, but I wrote out this list actually just for myself, and I figured that I was so satisfied with it I wanted to cover it in a video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Comment below how much you hate the fact that I put TNG last. I promise I do love TNG, just I love it less than all of the others. I will see you at the next one.